Welcome back to the show, Business Mastery for Startups, Scale-Ups, and Early Stage Businesses with your host, Jerry Gadori. That's me. And this week, we're talking with Marcy Clark. Marcy is the founder and owner of Marcy Clark PR and an expert in the space. Can't wait to hear more about this. PR is something I've done but don't know a ton about. Marcy, could you share a little bit more about yourself and your company?
Hi, Jerry. I am so honored to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for coming.
Um, yeah, so I've been in the PR and events space for about 20 years
Wow.
now. Yeah, so you don't stay in it this long unless you love it.
Or
It's
you're
something
crazy.
that, yeah, or you're a little crazy. It's the both.
Yes.
So I was a theater kid. That was my background. Actually, like a lot of the best publicists that I know come from the performing arts space. Is you have to be for PR. You have to be really unstoppable. You have to be somebody that you can hear all the no's for your client, so they don't have to hear it, and you can keep going till you get them the yeses in the media that make all the difference. So I'm very skilled at getting creative and coming up with new and fresh angles. And I specialize in earned media. So what I'm doing is I am interviewing my clients, I'm talking to them, and getting out the ideas, the story ideas that they have, pitching those to the media, and convincing the journalists, actual journalists, not paid people, that they should write about what my client is doing. And so this is, it's very different from marketing, and it's very different from how people think about PR.
That's exciting. Before I ask a
Yeah.
question that I'm really curious
Yeah.
about, I've got to mention this. I didn't know you
Yeah.
were a theater kid. My
Yeah.
oldest daughter was stage crew all through high school, and my youngest
Oh.
daughter was in every play from seventh grade to her
Oh.
senior year. And here's a quick funny note on her: you get her in a small group, 10 or less people, she won't open her mouth. You put her on a stage in front of a few hundred,
Wow.
her 5 foot tall ginger self will scream across the whole room. It's amazing.
Oh, I love people. I mean, I think theater helps with that. Theater helped me to really love people, see the uniqueness and the best in people. It brings out your empathy. So I love that your kids are doing that and I think it's that being able to kind of reinvent yourself. Something's not working. You're hitting your head against a wall. Okay, what's next? Half of what I learned in PR, what I need for PR I learned in improvisation, in scene study, right? In auditions. There's no new business meeting that is harder than a theater audition.
Yes. Yes. And my daughter did improv
Yeah.
as well. But if you let me, I'll gush
Yeah.
about my daughters for an hour.
Okay. Okay.
So
Well,
let me
that's
ask.
okay. I hoped I have that problem.
Well, let me ask you this. So I think for some people, PR and marketing feels the same. But I know from talking to you in
Yeah.
the past that it isn't. Could you kind of share
Yeah.
more about that so people can understand what marketing is versus PR?
Yeah. So very simply, marketing is a big umbrella, right? Think of it as like a big tent that includes within it public relations. It includes brand positioning, which is something that I do, and it can include under it, um, your website, your logo. It can include, brand names, taglines, all of these areas. So as a publicist who does branding, I do some of these aspects, but under marketing is also advertising. I don't do that. It's social media. I'll consult with people on their social media, but at the hourly that you're paying me as a media expert with 20 years, you don't necessarily want me running your social media. You can have that can be found a little bit cheaper, right? So, you want to have a cohesive strategy though. So somebody who is a brand strategist and publicist, they can help you with that. For one of my clients, I'm the chief marketing officer, right? But there's people I partner with for the advertising for the other pieces. Public relations, traditional PR, the main thrust of it is earned media. So that is me emailing, calling. I'm old school, right? I've been in this business since the, early 2000s. So I will pick up the phone and call a journalist. Especially sometimes I get them interested over email and then they're like, I'm not sure. And over the phone I can, convince them to stay engaged, stay on with my client, share why this issue matters so much that my client is being an expert on. um, PR is, getting the a lot of the news articles that you see. If you pick up a newspaper, if you pick up a magazine, if you listen to a podcast, if you pick up, whatever, media you're engaging with, chances are, maybe 60% of the time, a publicist might have pitched that story or surfaced, brought the story idea to the attention of a journalist on behalf of their client. So, and then there's also a lot of times where sometimes I pitch one type of story for my client, and then sometimes even 6 months or a year later, I've had, for example, one client, Psychology Today, reached out after I pitched a client had a sleep clinic. And 6 months later, I had finished, was wrapping up a client project, and they reached out and said, "Hey, we really want to do we saw you have an expert, a psychologist who's an expert in sleep. We would love to have him be, write some articles for us." So I secured him a column in Psychology Today at the
Wow.
end of our engagement. Yeah. So it's, PR is planting seeds. Some people describe it as a tap, right? Or it's not a tap, right? You don't turn it on and it's a gush of placements coming in. It's something that builds over time.
That makes sense. And I can imagine,
Yeah.
so I've worked with marketing firms before. What's
Yeah.
it like to work with a PR firm? How does that, if I were to say, gosh, I'd like to work with
Yeah.
Marcy Clark PR, how does that happen?
Yeah. So I make it really fun, right? Because of my background. So I start with, I do a really in-depth interview. So I get to know this person. And this is also practice for if they're doing podcast interviews on themselves, they're doing, they're interviewed for a profile for a magazine story. They have to practice being interviewed and talking about themselves. I'm the first person doing that. So I'm like a very friendly, low key, low stakes. And through that process, I ask them not just about what are they doing right now, what's newsworthy about their company right now. I'm also asking, tell me about, what did you want to be when you were a kid? What did how did you start your first company? What did you study in school? Oh, did you win any awards at your previous work? I had one author, for example, who really cool guy, and he was writing a book about his experience and style and exploring really creativity and self-expression, and his background had been as an accountant and a salesperson for this company, and winning you know hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars, maybe even in the millions over the years for his company. And and he'd had to be very buttoned up, very straight laced in his previous role. So, although those things don't seem to have anything to do with each other, through our process, I was able to actually weave that into the story, how he had changed. There was a before and an after for this human. And these kind of stories, it's like the humanizing of people so that, when you're pitching the media, you don't want anybody to seem one dimensional or too simple.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense. And
Yeah. So the interview is a big part of it. And then as well, then we go into, you know, um, like visualization. So I'm getting people, I might invite them closing their eyes and thinking about, if you imagine a New York Times headline and your name's in it, like really take the time. What is around it? What might that, title say? And we go through with a bunch of different kinds of media, and imagine you're opening up a magazine, you see yourself in it, your face. what does it look like? What's how many pages is it? So we go into that kind of visualization, and people are really intuitive actually about what's possible for them. Like, things they said in those initial sessions, I've achieved, in articles.
That's awesome. And do you predominantly work with business people or with government, or what's your typical clientele?
Yeah. So I do specialize in positioning people as experts. So I'm ideal for people that are purpose driven CEOs. They're sole entrepreneurs. Maybe they're a coach or a consultant. I work with people usually that have a business that is providing a good, for the public. So one of my clients is an app for people with disabilities. And, I help that client with everything from, securing, podcasts with people like yourselves and, New York Times articles, to also, if there is a potential partnership, we're talking with, Johns Hopkins about supporting some of our research that we are bringing people together, for people with disabilities. I'll be on those calls and just make sure, the communication gets furthered in a really efficient way.
That makes sense. So for
Yeah.
somebody like me, so I wrote the
Yeah.
book Destination Employer. My
Yes.
company helps typically startups and early stage companies to be able to consistently attract, recruit, and retain the top talent in their markets. Would I
Yes.
be the type of a company that you'd work with, or more like a fractional CEO or CFO or leadership coach? Or
No, like a person like yourself is ideal because you own your company, right? It's your full-time thing. Not that, those I do work with a lot of coaches, but people that write books,
Mhm.
that is such a gift for themselves and for a publicist. The shelf life of a book or a project, like that, what a lot of people don't know is that I can use that, oh, he's the author of, this book, and, we'd love to comment on this news story, and these are three possible, headlines, story angles we'd love to explore. We can dine out on that book for years.
And I plan on
So I think, yes,
it.
exactly. It took a lot of work to write it, right?
Yes.
Yes. So, it's nice because people know you're somebody that, the thing that it does is people know you're somebody that can organize their thoughts and, and can condense them. So it makes you a more trustworthy person to be interviewed.
Yeah, and I found, so I sometimes interview authors as well, and authors are great. I think it's the clarity of thought it takes to write a book. They're great on podcasts because they can answer questions succinctly, and then if you want to dig deeper, they're able to do that as well.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a lot of work initially to organize all your thoughts and get everything down. So that's actually a big part of my work is I help people. I'm like, let's rewrite your bio. Let's make it media friendly.
Mhm.
Let's get your media alert announcing this new initiative. Let's get your bio. Often I write my client's bio in 3 different links, right? Really short, two, 3 sentences, the one paragraph, and the 3, 4 paragraph, because different opportunities you need to have those ready to go. And you need to be able to highlight like what is of interest to the media. um, I also then organize like for all different types of media. A lot of people don't know this, but I would pitch very different types of story angles and headlines if I'm pitching a lifestyle publication like Well and Good, right? Or Allure magazine, as opposed to pitching the New York Times or the Washington Post. So you're doing different kinds of headlines, a different audience, and so I'll segment the media for my clients similar to if we were doing if they were going to do an ad buy. I segment the media, and then we come up with story angles and pitches for each of those segments. We'll do in the brainstorming, we'll come up with tons of options for each angle. And then we revisit them, on like a weekly or eventually maybe a bi-weekly call. And we fine tune, we freshen up. And then, I have conversations with people like you. I might say, Jerry, what are you seeing right now? What are you hearing from people that are in the hiring process right now? What are they having a hard time getting? Or what are you hearing from job seekers? Are they, somebody told me a third of people in tech right now are worried about losing their jobs.
Yeah,
Right. So that's a lot that can create a lot of movement, right?
for sure.
So how does that affect your work?
Yeah, it's I know your answer or asking the question hypothetically, but it's a crazy time right now in the
Yeah.
markets with everything going on. So when you're
Yeah.
working with a PR company, um, what can you expect? You know, you said
Hmm.
biweekly calls, different types of media. Do you specialize in a
Yeah.
particular type, or how does that work?
So I'm because I'm somebody, I've been in the industry a long time. I've worked specifically in a number of industries, but I am a generalist. So I can do, business, I can do, I had one client, one time I had my first PR job, right, fresh out of school. I was in England. I had the first gluten-free food company in England. I had a fueling solutions company, and I had a plastic surgery firm that were my clients all at the same time. And all of them were interesting, to me, because you're telling, you're figuring out ways to tell a business or a human story, and so I can work with a big variety. I would say, if you have a very B2B oriented business, I'm going to more likely be able to secure you, business publication, your in network, trade publications, and then, maybe some articles in, Financial Times. I've secured a number of clients in Financial Times, maybe Wall Street Journal, right? So they care, who cares about the financial stories? If you are a consumer client, or if, for yourself, Jerry, you know, jobs and, hiring and all these are big issues that everybody cares about, right? You have a B2B business, but it's a consumer story as well. So for you, I'd be pitching television. I'd be pitching, New York Times. How are they, who are they talking to about jobs? Who's writing about this? Who's getting the man on the street stuff? And then have a real expert, that to offer them.
That's really exciting. And
Yeah.
from an outcome
Yeah.
perspective, I imagine this is,
Hmm.
and if it's an unfair question, please don't
It's
feel
not.
obligated. But from an outcome perspective, if you engage with a company, how long does it typically take for them to start to see themselves in magazines or print or television or whatever?
Yeah. So one thing you'll hear from a lot of PR firms that scares people away, right, is people say, we can't guarantee results. We can't guarantee any, press, but we will, do all these things. We'll try really hard. Well, I don't know. I'm not going to hire somebody if that is their first instinct to go really hard on that. Like I get it. Usually I work with people, we start with 4 to 6 months, and then, with the option to continue at the same or similar rate for another 6 months or a year or so. And a lot of my clients, I usually work with, maybe a year and a half to, I have some clients I've worked with off and on for 10 years. And a lot of clients say, hey, I just did a new thing. Can I come back? We can do, a 3 month project. Yes, of course. So that's because I do secure results. I am like a dog with a bone, and so it might be that the first month or two we're refining your story, and it's just a slow trickle, and we're starting to have conversations with media. But by month three, you should have some article online or podcast. You should have some things happening, and then by month six, you should have a few articles out in the world, and several more opportunities in the hopper,
And for,
right? So I try to average, at least 2 opportunities a month for clients, if not, and I've had clients that I, did a 3-month project and got them 20 stories.
wow,
That's not typical, but I've done it a few times.
that's exciting. And from a workflow
Yeah.
perspective, so you engage with a prospect, the two of you decide to work together. You go through that process you described earlier on. You start reaching out
Mm-hmm.
to the various media outlets, whatever makes sense for that
Yeah.
particular client. Do you write the articles and they agree to publish them, or do you engage with them and then they interview your client?
Great question. So usually I engage the journalist and my client, get them on the phone, or a lot of times the journalists nowadays, they want to send an email Q&A, and that works better for some of my clients. They prefer that. It's 50-50 what people prefer. And then they go from there. That's common. Another way that often happens is sometimes people are very busy and they say, "Oh, this is really interesting. Would you like to write a guest article?" So, if they want to do a guest article, then sometimes my clients, it just depends on their skill level, their ability. So sometimes they'll say, "Oh, yeah, great." And I'll send them the parameters. I'll say, "Hey, can you do a guest article on this?" And they have to make it, it has to be personal. It has to be expert driven. They can't, you can't over rely on AI for this kind of thing. Journalists will know.
Yeah, most readers
And
will too.
yeah, yeah. So, sometimes the clients are writers and they'll do that. A lot of times my clients are busy running their companies. They're stressed. So sometimes what we do is I say, "Hey, get on the phone with me let's schedule an hour or 90 minutes and we'll bang it out. We'll write, the 5 paragraphs we need. We'll write it together." And then through that process, we also get ideas for more stories.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've written a book and I blogged for a very long time. I'm capable of writing
Yeah.
articles. The problem I typically have is just the time to do it. That's what's
Yeah.
usually the hard thing for me as a
Well,
business
and
owner.
I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of the doula or I'm helping, with the fear of the blank page
Yes.
and the overwhelm. Because what you really need is, the help with, we all need help focusing to get things done. So that's something I'm great at doing. I'm very motivated. I'm social motivated. So and a lot of my clients are too. That's why they're hiring, PR. They want to get in front of more people.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, I'm not a big LLM fan, but the one thing I do like it for is getting words on the page. None of those words are
Yes.
going to stay on my final page,
Yeah.
but just getting that process, that flywheel turning, it's super helpful for that.
Yeah, or even maybe you have a lot, maybe you have tons of ideas and you start writing out all, please help me organize, these key points into an article. And maybe you write 2 paragraphs of, ideas for your language learning model, and it spits out 3, and then you edit from there. So there's, it's okay to use tools, but you always you want to check everything because, as we know, AI can make up quotes and
Yes.
books that don't exist. And, we do have I do really consider myself, as much, I get paid by my clients, but, the media are my partners in this. So I consider myself, I'm a member of the media ecosphere, and I take that really seriously. And I don't publish fake things. I don't
Garbage.
publish fake quotes. Yeah, I'm not going to make stuff up. We can come up with a fresh initiative, an exciting idea. We can start, a foundation or a nonprofit, but we can't, I have had people say, "Oh, what if we say that I'm going to, walk across the country for this cause?" And then, I had somebody,
You better be willing
share that
to.
with me. And then, and then it turned out after a few weeks, then he was like, "Hey, the girl I was going to walk across the country for, we broke up, but I think I found another girl that I can walk." And I said, "Okay, I'm done. I'm not pitching the story."
Yeah. You say something that's so important in business that gets lost sometimes. You,
Yeah.
as a business person, make your reputation, and then from that point on, your reputation makes
Yeah.
or breaks you. So I couldn't
Yes.
agree more. You can't, if you don't
Yeah.
have integrity, you can't succeed. I couldn't
Yeah,
agree more.
almost all my clients come from referral.
Hmm.
So, that's because people, really trust me. They feel safe with me, and they know I'm working hard. They know I'm a straight dealer. Like if some story gets, killed, I'm like, I'm going to find another home for that idea. I'm going to be sad with them, and then we're going to, pick up together.
Yeah, every business relationship I've ever had over all my time in business has been built on two-part pillars: success and
Hmm.
trust. If there's not success, there's not a reason to continue. And if there's not trust,
Yep.
you can't do anything. You can't, you're
Yeah.
always second guessing everything that goes on. So I couldn't
Yeah.
agree
And
more.
you don't need, I really think the success piece, like I don't paper my clients to death. I don't spend a ton of my working hours telling them, detailing, this is all the things I did for you. Like it doesn't matter. What matters is, hey, these are the opportunities. Hey, this
Yeah,
person, I just scheduled an interview, check your Calendly, make sure it's there. Right. That's what you care about.
no, I couldn't
Yeah.
agree more.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this.
And what you need for your website is you need those logos, all the media logos, you need your articles, you need the links back to your website, right? That's the actual stuff that makes a difference and has people go, "Oh wow, oh Jerry was quoted in, Inc magazine and Forbes and Business Insider. I guess you know what, let's go with him."
No, I couldn't agree more. Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
So if you're a business person like myself, when you're looking for a PR firm, what things should you be looking for?
Great question. I think you want to know, a lot of times there's big firms you can talk to, right? I'm a sole entrepreneur and I partner with other media professionals. So if there's a big account, maybe I, bring in another senior publicist to work with me on something. But in general, you're working with me, you're talking to me, you're emailing with me, right? Maybe I have an associate that helps, but he's not brand new. And one thing I think that people get burned is they hire a big fancy firm in New York or San Francisco, or I'm in San Francisco, but they hire a big firm that has amazing placements for blue chip clients, and maybe their rates are 10, 15, 20 grand a month, right? And they show you all these great results they've achieved, but the thing is they often staff it, so by the time that you're meeting with the senior people, you're meeting with the salesperson with all the experience, but then when it comes to who's actually writing your pitches and sending them out, it's the more junior new people. So I've seen this has been true for 20 years. I've done a little work in house, mostly I've been on my own, because that ecosystem, it kind of really burns people out. And maybe they're like, oh, you know what, wow, their rate's normally 10, I got in for 5. They're excited, and then they've spent, after 4 months they've spent 20 grand, and they don't have anything to show for it. And they meet me and they're like, oh yeah, I tried PR, it didn't work. And it makes me sad because
It hurts your
they could have worked with
reputation by
me.
extension.
Yes, yes. And they could have worked with me for, a longer period of time. And, I would have, I know how to get around initial media hesitation, and, we figure something else out.
Yeah, and I will say this, Marcy, what you described, unfortunately, is also common in business and technology consulting. The salesperson
Yeah.
sells the project, the company sends in their A team in the beginning. Once things settle down, they start subbing out that A team with their C team. And before you know it, the
Yeah.
people you're talking to are nowhere near the caliber that you were originally dealing with.
Yep. Yep. Exactly. Exactly.
So
So it's, yeah.
So that's very exciting. If people do want to work with you, how can they get in touch with you? How can they find you?
Yeah. So I am at Marcy Clark PR, MarcyClark, PR as in public relations. And I love to set up an initial call with somebody if they're interested. They can email me. And I have my whole portfolio is on the website. So it's not everything I've gotten, but it's highlights from every, segment that I work with, from, arts and entertainment, fashion to, business and tech. So they can see, oh wow, she's secured all these places. I trust this person.
That's awesome.
That's my hope.
For folks listening, for newer listeners, that website will be on the show notes, so you can find it there, so you can reach out to Marcy directly. Marcy, I don't know a lot about the PR world, so I feel like there's probably things I missed. Is there any question I haven't asked that I should have that would help people to better understand your business and kind of when it makes sense for them to engage a PR firm, maybe?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah. Well, I like both your questions. I think about, in terms of when it makes sense to engage a PR firm. If you have, for example, a new product launching that you want to talk about, or you are going to be releasing a book, or you're going to, you're getting ready to be, sell your goods at TechCrunch, for example, you want to be thinking, go back, look at a date 2, 3, ideally 3 months or so in advance of that, and get, or 6 months if you can, and engage me then, so that we get the media. If you have a number of articles that you can show where you've been featured, then when you are at TechCrunch and you're selling your product or, your service, people trust you. So you have that, that thing. Or if there's even a funding announcement that you're going to be able to have about your Series A, it takes time for us to get everything together. So engage me, 6 weeks to 2 months in advance, and we can get everything together, make it exactly perfect how you want it. And, and all those stakeholders that we have. And we can start pitching other ideas, getting your name familiar with the journalists so that they've heard about you at least 3 times, right? That's a common number. They say once you hear about something 3 times, I always say, you're about something 3 times and you start to think it's your idea, right? You're like, oh, I've heard of that. Yeah. So we start creating the familiarity. And then when I say, hey, this company has, it has a really exciting announcement, or they have a new product, the journalists have this recognition and this friendliness to you. Yeah. Even if it's subconscious for them.
It's interesting. I've gone to consulting clients and shared an idea with them, and they were interested but didn't do anything, shared an idea with them, interested but didn't do anything. Then a month goes by and they go, hey, I had this idea. And it's the literal thing that I talked to them about. And I'm like, oh my God.
No, oh my God. So yeah, you have to get, when as a consultant, you sort of have to get over your idea, your ego a lot, right?
Yes. It's not about you. It's so about funny. The outcome you achieve for your client. It becomes a mantra you say to yourself in the mirror every morning to maintain your sanity.
Yeah, exactly.
So
exactly.
It was great having you on the show today. I think this is a good place to wrap up. I'd love to have you on again if ever there's anything else you'd like to add. I'd love to have you on again.
It would be my pleasure. And yeah, I was saying, it might be fun to look at, kind of maybe some of the questions that I ask a client at, this intake interview, maybe that would be kind of a fun exercise people could do, in the car, wherever they're listening to you, they can get some free expertise from me, and then hopefully maybe they get excited to do more.
Let's plan on doing that as a follow-on episode.
Okay, awesome.
Well, thanks.
I really appreciate your questions. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. As always, for folks listening, thanks for sharing some of your valuable time with us between now and next week. Continue building that awesome thing and providing that awesome service. Welcome back to the show, Business Mastery for Startups, Scale-Ups, and Early Stage Businesses, with your host, Jerry Gadori. That's me, and our host, our guest, who you might recognize from a few weeks ago, Marcy Clark. Now, when Marcy joined us last time, she talked about PR firms, how they're different from marketing, and how to work with them. This time, we're going to look a little bit deeper at both what you should look for and the types of questions that a PR firm will ask, both before they've signed or you've signed with them, and also once they've started, to better help empower you to make better decisions on who you work with, as well as, to know what to expect so you'll be prepared. Marcy, what do you have for us today?
Okay. So today we're going to look at 6 questions that a PR firm should ask you to get you press. So when I talk about this, these are questions that you wouldn't expect all of these to be answered in the getting to know you pre-contract phase, right? But you would want to hopefully have at least 2, maybe 3 of these questions or similar asked to you, before they make your contract. You don't want a PR firm that is just happy to just take anybody's money. These are questions that determine what is newsworthy about you. And, some people really know, okay, I have this brand new thing. I have this announcement. We have a partnership. We have investment. Those are obviously newsworthy things, but there's a lot more that I call perennial news, topics that I excavate with my clients when we do the, my deep intake process with them.
That sounds exciting. I look forward to hearing about it.
Yeah. And so I thought the fun way would be, Jerry, is if I ask you these questions so that you're a little in the hot seat, but, I think it'll be a fun way to do it. And through that process, the audience will get a little sense of how my PR brain works and how we tease out what aspects might be relevant to the press. So I'll try to highlight some of those as we go.
For love of my audience, I will endure your hot seat.
Yes. and if you're listening to this podcast, I invite you to, if you're able, have a pen and paper nearby, write down these questions. You can email me. I can send you them if you want. And, have a think for yourself so that you can go deeper into creating your media ready bio, your media kit, all those good details.
And for new listeners, as always, and experienced listeners know this, Marcy's contact info will be in the show notes. So if you want to reach out to her for clarification on these questions, for the list of them, or anything else, please look in the YouTube notes, the Apple podcast notes, any of those areas.
Yes. All right. So question number 1. So what makes you, Jerry, and your product or service different from others on the market?
That's a great question. So I think what we do differently than other companies is that so little background. So again, those who don't know me can better understand the context here. So I'm a podcaster, I'm an author, but I'm also a consulting firm owner. My company, Redbeard Solutions, implements what we call the Destination Employer Methodology, which is also the name of my book. And really that methodology is espoused within it. You can see it on Amazon. But the short version is we help startups, early stage businesses, and small businesses to build the people side of their business. What's unique about us beyond 25 years of experience building companies is that we take the entire talent acquisition, recruitment, and retention pipeline and create one unified, comprehensive process. And by connecting them in that way, we get a lot of synergy. So our retention is better than industry standards. Our recruitment better than industry standards. Starting off with our attraction phase and building an employer brand really empowers that. So that cohesive plan is the big game changer for us.
Yes. And I also noted when I was looking at your site, and something I really appreciated on Redbeard Solutions is it shows the you have it written out like possible plans, how it works, how the payment schedule is really different. How it's like public relations, right? It's a retainer, it's a longer relationship, it's much more full service, right? It's not, you know, here, please, accept this candidate and I can get my lump sum payment and then, the transaction's done, right? This is, yeah, it's not that method. It is really about a relationship building, trust, and in the long run, you made the case about how much money a company is going to save by having you on their team, as external to internal HR. So,
Yes,
yeah. So I
great
love that.
observation. Yep.
Yeah. So I think that is, that model, the difference in the model, I think is would be a really important point of difference. And, something I would want to, how I'd want to highlight that in the media might be to talk about what's wrong, what's broken in, the traditional model, and how, and then, using your book as scaffolding, as, ideas as part of your bona fides, right? Then that will help us, in positioning you as an expert. So, which we'll get more into that in a little bit.
No, I
All right.
appreciate that
So,
observation because that's also a part of our differentiation. So for those of you that have ever worked with a traditional staffing firm, the majority utilize what's called a contingency model, where they get paid a percentage of the first year's salary for the folks they place. Our firm, because we do much more than just staffing, we do employer brand work, retention, strategizing, leadership coaching. That package is an annual program that's broken out with monthly payments. And the reason for the difference, very simply, is that first model, the contingency model, it incentivizes speed over quality, and it creates an almost mercenary relationship between the vendor and their client. Our model is designed over time so that we can empower you, the startup founder or business leader, with the ability to do things on your own. And then our programs are structured such that what degree that we're involved in doing them for you on your journey to learning is how much we charge. But even our most expensive programs still wind up saving our clients over 50% over contingency staffing. And that's a whole story for another day. And if you'd like to talk to me about it, reach out. But that's why we changed the model. Our model incentivizes long-term success. The contingency model incentivizes speed over quality.
yes. Sometimes in PR, people like to make an analogy between a popular business model that we're aware of and this current one, right? You might hear people say the Uber for, you know, private jets or something like that, right?
Yes.
You hear about like that. So in this case, it's making me think about the companies that have like the lifetime guarantee for their umbrella or their suitcase or some of their gear. I don't know if I feel like Eddie Bauer had that for certain things, or Lens, right? Some of these companies that they have these long-term guarantees. So I feel like that's that kind of feeling that they get from working with you. So that dovetails into our next question, which is how do clients and customers get to feel when they're interacting with your business? So and an add-on to that would be like, is there a way that you're taking care of clients or meeting their needs that makes your company significantly better?
Yeah, absolutely. So this again is a question that points to our way of doing business. And two-part answer. The first is that cohesive plan that touches every aspect of a person's interaction with your company from the first time they ever see your employer brand straight through the exit interview when they leave your organization. That comprehensive plan really creates an efficient program that outperforms industry standards by orders of magnitude. The second part is, because we're there for the long haul, we can take the time to ensure that the methodology we implement sinks in. So for many of you that have been involved in any type of a change management process, you'll know that the key to success is effective, consistent communication and consistent retention until the new thing becomes the old thing, till the old workflow is replaced in habit by the new
Mm.
one. And by having that year-long engagement, we take care of that.
That's great. That's great. And I imagine as well with the continued engagement, then if as people are leaving in their exit interviews, right, they're giving feedback to HR, you know, this was too fast paced for me. This was too, I didn't like, that, it was such a focus on results when, I felt like my other work wasn't appreciated, stuff like that, which is sometimes that's a case with certain companies, right? Or they have all different, every company has different cultures. And so, one thing, you had told me in another conversation was that it's very much about, you know, the authenticity, right? So there's that authenticity between, from the whole process. And so what I love about that is that, the people being recruited through your process, they get to feel like they're dealing with a plain dealer, an honest person, an honest team, and they get, that hand holding, what they're told at the beginning. It's fast paced. It's about results. Those are fine if you know in advance this is what it is, right?
Exactly. You mentioned a couple things I'd like to expand on real quick. So, our destination employer program is all about making sure the company develops a reputation in the marketplace as a location for top talent to maximize their careers. We then break that down to three phases: the attract phase, the recruit phase, and the retention phase. When you describe the exit interview, that unsurprisingly is the end of the process. That information needs to find its way back if it's consistent. Now, of course, we don't change everything over every single item,
Yeah.
but if we see consistent messaging that maybe the way we're presenting the company is different than it really is, we have to adjust our employer brand so that the people that would be drawn to that true environment like it, and the people that wouldn't are pushed away. Just like any other type of marketing, it should pull and push. It should pull your ideal prospect or candidate in our case, and push your others. So that's critically important. I talk about it in phases, but if I was to draw it as an image, it would be a circle.
It's great. It's great. So, what feedback do you get from clients that keeps you going?
Yeah, it's a two-parter. So this is going to be a mystery to no one who's been involved in the job market or building a business over the last 5 or so years. But the ability to keep people's attention is getting harder and harder. We reread and see these nightmares like about quiet quitting and the Great Resignation and quiet vacations and all of these things. Those are all engagement problems. And the feedback
Mm.
I'm getting from my clients is that by implementing our methodology, they aren't having those problems. Why? Because the leadership framework we teach, engage, fulfill, and grow, it kills it. And
Mm.
because in a truth in advertising perspective, we're making sure we understand the true culture in our company and what it's like to work there. And those things are being reflected in our employer brand. When people come in the door, they know what to expect and they get it. Is it perfect? Nothing is. But we're getting more than double the average retention rates. And if you're going to build a successful business, I say this jokingly often, but it's a heck of a lot easier to fill a bucket than it is a colander.
That's great. That's great. So, a few things I would pull out of that for our PR efforts, right? So, one would be that the statistic you had, right, about the double the retention rates, right? That's like that you want to highlight immediately, and then you go into maybe a client case study or a testimonial, right, including a third party endorsement within my media pitch, right? And then what I'd want to pull out would be kind of some of, and this might even be like the headline of the article that I would pitch, right? Would be, um, how the exit interview helps, informs the position, the description of the new role, right? Or something, like the exit interview is king, or something like that. So if I'm pitching people that are writing about HR, they're writing about business, they're writing about retention, I want a headline. That's like something I'm always thinking about, is what are headlines where it's a little bit subverting expectation, right? We think it's all about, like the front end. How do you get people in? How do you take care of them? The soft stuff. We spent so much time as a culture thinking about, massage and, nap pods, and those things are nice. But now we've learned, actually, people really just want to be treated like grown-ups. They want to have free time when they need it. There's different values, but the exit interview, really often drives home how, being treated with respect and having a good manager is the most essential.
An interesting quick note on that. Exit interviews are wildly unpopular, as are employee reviews. But the reason for that, very simply, is most organizations do them wrong. An employee review and an exit interview should be about that person's experience. Now, in the case of employee reviews, obviously, we're measuring their ability to do their job.
Yeah.
But as much as is possible, you want to do that through the lens of that person's development. We want to make it about their success. We want to turn our KPIs and metrics into their success and what they're looking to achieve. And the better we can tie that together, the more fulfilled that they're going to feel. When it comes to exit interviews, and again, this goes back to reputation, but
Yes.
by developing a culture in our company where if Marcy has been with us and she's reached the cap of her growth with our company, her skills are where they're going to be, we've nothing more to offer her. Her responsibilities are where they're going to be, we've got nothing more to offer her. That's a natural breaking point. If Marcy wants to continue to grow, she has to leave. So it's incumbent on us as an employer, either A, to find a way to continue that growth. And if we can't do that, which, spoiler alert, we usually will not be able to, but if we can't do that, we want to make that exit graceful and easy. Marcy shouldn't be punished because we don't have the role she needs anymore. And a lot of companies treat that like a defection when somebody leaves. And that's why exit interviews wind up a bad thing. Done right, they're of value to both parties.
That's great. Yeah. So like headline wise, I would be thinking about, maybe 5, questions that, you want, essential questions you want to ask in an exit interview, to, improve your company experience, or improve your employee retention, right? Or what everyone's getting wrong about exit interviews, right? So this is just one small aspect of the business, but this would be an example of taking, a micro element of a store of, your work, and bringing it into a bigger conversation, right? So in PR, I'll pitch a mixture. It might be a macro story, something about, I might pitch you for stories about, the HR trends overall, what's happening in general, layoffs, new jobs, what's available, what are employers seeking, general macro story. Or I might pitch, a micro story where we're looking at just one piece, like, what, the lack of transparency is hurting employer retention, and the hiring process hurts employer retention. That would be like one piece of this big process you have. So yeah. All right.
Awesome.
Okay. So question 4. So as I'm positioning you, Jerry, as the expert, right, for your company, and that's my specialty, is positioning CEOs and founders as experts. So I would want to get into not just, your current expertise, what you're doing now, but I like to know, what were you doing before you started this business? Maybe I'm looking for, is there a through line to your career? Maybe an interesting story. Some clients have even told me, gone back to, you know, I had an interior designer who, would always go to, antique markets and everything with her dad when she was a little girl. Like her whole life, she was looking for and curating beautiful things. So I'm even going back to childhood, if that feels relevant to you. So it's an
Sure, I
open-ended
would say,
question, but I want to hear more about you, Jerry.
sure. So I think where my story starts as related to this would be my time in the Marine Corps. So I did signals intelligence in the Marine Corps, held a top secret SCI clearance there.
Mm.
My time in the Marines really rekindled my love of technology. After the Marines, I became a technical recruiter, which is where a lot of my direct recruitment experience, of course, comes from as it relates to Redbeard. I went from technical recruiter to technical sales to branch manager to region manager. I ran the New England market for Kelly IT. And in those days, I was a $6 million business.
Wow.
From there, I moved into consulting. I worked for a friend of mine as his principal consultant. So at doing that, I did sales training, recruiter training, management training, sales and recruitment fractional management. Then I started my first company, Influence Understood. The focus there, though I did some sales and recruiter training, was really more on the management and ownership side. My time with my first job at Menemsha Group, the principal consultant job, really taught me that the majority of problems in technology services, which is where I was focused back then, were in the
Mm-hmm.
leadership and owner space. That's where where most of these problems were initiated and frankly where they stopped. So that was my primary focus. And as part of that, that job matured into me taking senior executive roles in companies for a period of time to get them past the hurdle. While doing that, I became the president of a company called Apicero. And in just 5 years, we went from 2 people, no office, nothing, through 9 offices in 3 countries, and a $250 million acquisition by NTT Data.
Wow.
So that was super, super exciting. And I learned so much in that period of time. And I hope this doesn't sound like an exaggeration. I worked about 80 companies, but I learned more in that 9 or so years than I did in all my time before that. Having the opportunity to work closely with founders of everything from little, 500K companies straight up through publicly traded companies, I just got an insight into what works and what doesn't work. And all of that together is what I wrote the book Destination Employer from. And then when Destination Employer hit #1 on Amazon and was really successful, I used that material to create the Destination Employer Academy at
Mm-hmm.
destinationemployer.co. So that's a self-paced program for those founders and business owners that want to learn this on their own. And then I pivoted Redbeard Solutions, which prior to that was focused on cybersecurity and technology staffing and solutions work, to implementing the Destination Employer methodology. And that's really how we got where we are today.
It's an amazing life story. I'm hearing a lot of things within that. I'm hearing with the company that you grew. I think how many employees? It started at 2. How many employees did it get up to?
2,500. So I
2,500.
understand scale. And a real quick note on that for you folks out there that are still small and you're starting to get to that hockey stick stage, it is such an incredible ride. It's exciting, but it's taxing. And I want to point out one kind of cautionary tale here, real quick.
Yeah.
Your company's growth will stop at your development rate, at your ability rate. So as a founder or business leader, it's
Mm-hmm.
critical that you keep growing, keep learning. Otherwise, you will halt your company's growth.
Yes. Yes. I mean, I think that's a really interesting. That's an interesting angle by itself, right? That's a rich angle. Like the skills you need for a 100-person company, right? Where you might be able to recognize everybody, learn their names. That's very different than, a 2,000, 3,000, 20,000 person company. The skills are different. The team members you need, the skills they need to have, that's all different. So,
100%.
So I think that's a really rich area. I think, um, leading in hyper growth, right? That is an area of expertise that you have that is, that's really rich. There's a gazillion stories we could come up with just from that area. And then I'm hearing, with your background, going from being a Marine with top secret security clearance, and I'm sorry if I'm getting terminology wrong, but
Oh, you're good.
with high security clearance, and then working, having that specialty in placing security personnel that you need to trust them. It's such a deep level. So within that, it's like that's an organization that's known for really weeding out people that are not of really high integrity and work ethics. So you have, through being a Marine with that work specialty, and then going into, a consulting role with that same specialty, and where you have to also show that similar, the really deep integrity to be the best in your business. Those are kind of through lines. Those are, aspects of your background that really carry a lot of weight. Um, so I think it's great. I think, the variety of companies you've worked with is really interesting. There's a lot of numbers. When I'm writing a pitch, when I'm writing, offering headlines, when I'm talking to a journalist, I want to use numbers because, and, not just statistics, but, from 2 employees to 2,500, or, worked with 800 companies, numbers like that. It does a few things. It breaks up the text. It shows, this is not just, a new business, this is a really established, this is, a senior expert in their field. And, it just attracts the eye. When you're looking at a pitch, right? I'm looking at the eye scans, and how it works is you're looking at maybe the first line, scan a little, you're looking for capitalized words, proper nouns, names of companies, lists, and the eye scans on and lands on numbers and percentages as well. And then often, if you're looking at a paragraph, your eye will look at kind of the last sentence or the last, line of that as well. So these are things, I know from my 25 years, in the industry, how I'm looking at that.
No, that's great. And I'll tell you, numbers make things real. If I use softwares like big or small or hard or easy, those are too subjective. My
Yes.
big at 100 might be your small, depending on the environment you come from. So yes, numbers make everything real.
Yes. Yes. Okay. All right. So now I would want to ask you, what, well, I guess we kind of just covered this, but, my question I always ask is, what has your current endeavor and your previous work made you an expert in? So this is kind of what we've been teasing out, the whole time is, this, making your company a destination that people want to work for. You're an expert in security, staffing. You're an expert in, um, retention. You're an expert in, the whole process, reinventing the process. You're an expert in, the financials and what's working and not working about the, employee, the recruiting pipeline, right? So I think there's a lot. Are there any other aspects of, your leadership style, your understanding of sales, or, other pieces you would want to share with CEOs and entrepreneurs?
Yeah, so you've mentioned security a few times, and that was an area we focused on. We work in all areas of business now
Mhm.
because the destination employer methodology is business vertical agnostic. But saying all of those things, really, when you strip everything away, what I specialize in is building and leading highly performing teams that produce consistently over an extended period of time. And if you're growing an organization, you need that. Your team and stories about your team should create raving customers for your company and keep your competitors up at night. Those two things aren't happening, then there's room for improvement.
That's great. Yeah. So I love how your focus is on your employer's success and their bottom line, right? Not just finding an employee that ticks boxes and is ready to go, but somebody who's actually going to succeed there and improve their bottom line. So that's great.
That's key. I
Um,
mean, I've been doing this for a long time, and I've got to say, I've seen far more bad matches than I have bad candidates and bad companies. And it's an
mhm.
avoidable mess, but when you
Yeah.
make that mistake, everyone loses. So
Yep.
it's the most important thing to avoid.
Yeah. So my last question that I ask people is, why is now the moment for this business? And why is now the moment for you, Jerry?
Oh my gosh. I'll tell you, of all the questions you've asked, that might be the easiest one to answer. So,
Mhm.
as of this recording, it's fall of 2024. We've got a world that's preparing for an AI revolution. We're still recovering from the pandemic. Our inflation rate, regardless of what we're being told by the government, is still sky high, and we all feel that. Money is still a mess as far as business is concerned, getting investment and such. And if that's not enough, it's an election year in the United States, which always makes everything kind of crazy. All of that uncertainty makes business difficult. And you might be tempted, especially with all the layoffs that we're hearing about, to think that recruitment and team building has never been easier. But nothing is further from the truth. Number one, top talent always has options. And that's what we're here to talk about, top talent. Number two, all of that uncertainty causes fear inside of your organization as well. It doesn't make
Mhm.
people less of a flight risk, it makes them more of a flight risk. Because if they get the slightest whiff or idea that there's a problem in your company, they're going to start putting out their feelers so they have a plan B if something bad happens. Adding to everything I've said, trust in the United States is at bargain basement levels. Trust in government, trust in business, trust in any large institutions. So these folks are coming from a place of distrust. So, what Destination Employer is all about is building your reputation as a place for these folks to be. And by doing that, you're insulating yourself, you're insulating your team, and you're insulating your customers from all the madness that I described. I can't think of a better time to put in this energy to make sure that you've got a killer employer brand, you've got killer recruitment processes, killer offer processes, and the folks in your organization, because you listen to them so they feel heard and valued, you've ensured throughout the recruitment process that their personal values match your company's and your goals aligned, and you're seeing to their skill growth and responsibility. Because those things are in place, you're incentivizing them to stay, which is a whole lot of words to say you don't have retention problems. I can't think of a better time.
Yes, because it's very expensive, right? If you have
Yes.
to, if you're not seeing and understanding that, there is, fear maybe coming from top down or coming from, some badly placed, managers or whatever the case, right? If there's no awareness of this, no cognizance of it, it can be extremely expensive if you have employees jumping ship because they feel insecure. They don't feel like they're getting that fair shake.
And Marcy, keep this in
Mhm.
mind. We're talking about the top talent, especially. So, for
Yes.
business owners, here's a short exercise for you to do. If you're a company with 20 or fewer people, imagine the two top performers in your entire company leave abruptly. What does that mean to you?
Mm.
If you're a larger company, imagine the one top performer in each one of your teams leaves. What does that mean to your company? And that should
Yeah.
be all the incentive you need to understand just how important this is.
Yes. To look at, what's a different way to approach this, Yeah, I think there could even be a media PR angle around, if, why, you know, um, economic fears, you know, uh, make, top talent, create the biggest risk for top talent to leave,
Absolutely.
something around that. I think that's an interesting angle that, people aren't really talking about. So I think that's a great, area of expertise that you have.
Yeah, and I don't like to fearmonger, so don't
No.
misunderstand my intent when I say do that exercise. But
Yeah.
our business culture venerates the founder, but rarely looks one layer under at the incredible people that really cause that explosive growth. What would
That's
Apple be without Wozniak? So
Yeah.
imagine for a minute in your company, your Wozniak leaves because you're not communicating effectively, or they're getting a bad feeling about the business, or they're seeing a lot of employee churn and wondering if they're next. What would that
Yes.
have meant to Apple had Wozniak left? What would that mean to you if your top folks left? And that's what this is all about, preventing that.
That's great. That's great. Yeah. Well, thank you.
You're
This
welcome.
was really I loved learning about Redbird Solutions and your book. So I hope I provided for you and for the listener some PR questions to, get in the frame of mind of thinking about approach press. How do I what conversations are relevant that I want to bring to the media. It can't be generic. That's the main
Mhm.
thing I want to hit home. I go really deep in my, in these conversations with clients, because if you're pitching just a generic story, like, I'm sorry,
Yeah, why would they
the
buy it or
yeah,
write
why
about
does
it?
the Wall Street Journal want to talk to you if you're just, a generic, oh, I have a great recruiter for you to talk to, even just being a big company having a lot of clients, that is in and of itself, you aren't if you aren't presenting novel ideas to go with your bona fides, they can't trust that you're somebody that can think on your feet, answer dynamic questions, and give them, at the end of the day, what the media is looking for is they're looking for a quote that is thoughtful, that is maybe a little, pithy or edgy, right? That has some, maybe some metaphor or some personification, has some personality to it. Something that, you want to learn how to think in headlines. So that's what I'm an expert in, is thinking in headlines and translating, my clients' expertise into headlines.
So that's awesome. And this is totally unscripted. So I'm putting Marcy on the hot seat now.
Yeah.
So if she looks surprised, folks, it's fair. So I answered 6 questions for you. Let me ask one back.
Yes.
So you do what we just did. Some of it maybe a little bit before the engagement starts, some of it at the
Mhm.
beginning once the engagement starts. Now that you've got all this data, what is your next step? How do you engage with the media side of this to turn all this into articles and news pieces and whatnot?
Great question. So when I have a conversation like this, right, and it might even go, I might do two of these with a client, right, to go even deeper. But I start writing down during this process. I start writing down two main areas of notes. So one is going to be all of these headline ideas, right, and then also writing down media segments. So what are the media lists that I want to start pulling? So I start pulling these media lists. I start looking at, you know, um, you know, uh, what, magazines, what newspapers, if you're an alum of Harvard, right? Maybe I want to, pitch Harvard Business Review for somebody. If they're, you know, yeah, even if they're an alum of, Cal Poly. I had, a friend, helped get them a article in Cal Poly and figure out what to talk about with that, with their magazine. So I want to look at, the magazines, the newspapers, all of these kind of and usually I'm pitching slightly different headlines to different news organizations, and different types of media. So we call, a genre of press, we call it what the people write about, we call it a beat. So for you, I might be looking at who's covering the, HR beat. If I'm looking at more macro, if I'm looking at trade publications, maybe we're pitching guest articles for you, right? Offering you for that. If I'm pitching podcasts, that's, getting you on a bunch of podcasts. I'm sure you are on several on the regular. That those are slightly, different headlines. And for that, I might be pitching some that are focused on entrepreneurs, small, business people, right? Others that are focused on, talking directly to CEOs, people at, medium to larger organizations. And if I'm pitching you for television, that's again, I'm making a separate media list and I'm pitching you very differently depending on if it's, the business org or if it's, the mainstream news desk, right? So those are, there's probably going to be a little more play on the business side, but there's times when there's overlap and they need an expert like yourself for these different areas. I'm also paying attention, and I might pull, like, between this first call we have, I might pull a bunch of news articles and say, hey, this is what I'm seeing, or hey, I just saw this statistic that 1/3 of employees are worried about, in tech have worries about, layoffs, and, Google is, doing kind of funny things. Like I heard recently they have a policy that if you arrive past 9 a.m., they cancel all your meeting spaces for the day. Right. Like,
Wow.
they're kind of doing death by a thousand cuts type things,
We used to
and
jokingly, and joking's not the right word, but we used to refer to those as attrition layoffs, where people
yes.
just make it unpleasant for folks and they choose to leave and then they don't backfill the roles.
Yeah. And I think that's really common. So it's looking at, kind of, looking at news headlines and how do we pitch based on that too. So I start making a plan based on, all of these different kinds of angles, all these different possible pitches. And then I start, making my own editorial calendar for how I'm going to pitch you based on what we think is, and my, years of experience, what I think is the strongest angles. And then I move forward, with each of these segments and tweaking the pitches, for each. And I'm very much hitting the ground running. So I will, get your bio. I'll get a press release if you have a big news announcement for you, but I'm not papering my clients to death. You're not going to see every pitch before it goes out, but you're going to approve all the basic language, and you're going to, trust that, you're going to have the angles run by you before I start pitching.
That's awesome. I think that's great. And I thank you for coming back on, by the way.
Yeah,
Normally I would ask here for your contact info, but we already have it since you've been on before.
Yeah,
So
marcycarpr.com.
Exactly right. So for folks watching, again, that will be in the show notes. I think this is a good place to wrap up today. So for anybody out there in audience land, as we always say, have a great week, make something awesome, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks again, Marcy. Deeply appreciate you coming back on.
Thank you, Jerry. My
You're welcome.
pleasure. Really thankful. Okay. Bye.